We just won, and we've won big because of you.
Primary blowout. Joe Biden takes his first win, and it is a big one. Good morning. I'm Glenna Milberg in South Carolina. The race is reset heading into Super Tuesday. We have a live report from the campaign trail.
And I'm Janine Stanwood in for Michael Putney. We're talking politics this morning and big health news.
Am I concerned? Obviously, I'm concerned.
We haven't, to my knowledge, dealt with something like this before.
Are we ready for a coronavirus emergency? Our local leaders are weighing in, and so is Representative Donna Shalala.
But we shouldn't pretend that this isn't going to spread. This may be another flu-like virus, though probably more deadly.
We're going to remember the mayor, not with grief, but with gratitude.
Sudden death of a popular mayor, Justin Flippin, was just 41 years old. We talk about the legacy he leaves behind. Good morning, everybody. The big story in the presidential race, Joe Biden's decisive win in South Carolina. The former vice president was expected to do well, but his big victory could reshape the Democratic race moving forward. Glenna is live this morning in Columbia, South Carolina, where Biden gave his first primary victory speech. Glenna, great to see you. What a night.
What a night, Janine. Hi, everyone. What a difference a state makes. Boy, this is a first look in the primary season at what the African-American majority electorate results would look like. So Joe Biden now has the money and the momentum and the new messaging going into Super Tuesday, which is in just a couple of days. But there, the calculations change again.
South Carolina. My buddy Jim Clyburn, you brought me back.
Hard to overstate how critical the South Carolina win is to Joe Biden's campaign.
All of those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign. Just days ago, the press and the pundits had declared this candidacy dead. Now, thanks to all of you, the heart of the Democratic Party, we just won, and we've won big because of you.
The support he could not muster in Iowa and New Hampshire, he did from South Carolina's majority African-American vote.
Our candidate, a real good man.
The endorsement and coaching from state Democrats' iconic Congressman James Clyburn.
We don't have time for a local issue right now.
A more managed public messaging. And personal connections with supporters.
Biden, experience, respect.
Lines of early voters and absentees made Biden the projected winner announced seconds after the polls closed and
this campaign is taking off.
Gave Biden a game-changing spread that keeps frontrunner Bernie Sanders from leaving South Carolina unstoppable.
That will not be the only defeat. There are a lot of states in this country. Nobody wins them all. I want to congratulate Joe Biden on his victory tonight.
A gracious Bernie Sanders spoke from the Super Tuesday campaign trail in Virginia, apparently unfazed by his distant second place, garnering, as expected, strong support from younger voters. The first casualty of South Carolina.
Hey, you guys.
Billionaire Tom Steyer dropped out of the race. He spent $21 million plus here, his best showing yet, though not enough to sustain.
I will be the first to say that the first four contests haven't gone exactly as I'd hoped.
Also leaving South Carolina without delegates, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg, who soared in Iowa and New Hampshire. He finds here the concerns of his appealing to voters of color well-founded.
I am proud of the votes we earned, and I am determined to earn every vote on the road ahead.
Even before the results came in last night, most of the candidates had already decamped from South Carolina and headed to various Super Tuesday states to campaign there for Tuesday. There is a mother load of delegates, a third of delegates available in the country, available on Tuesday. And Mike Bloomberg enters the race. Janine?
Yeah, he definitely is the X factor in that one. So, Glenna, South Carolina was an open primary, and you reported on Word that there were some Republicans who would vote to sow some chaos to pick a weak Democrat. Was that ever a thing?
You know, it was not a thing apparently last night. Just for anyone who's not really in deep with South Carolina politics, open primary is so much different than Florida. Any registered voter, no matter what party, can vote in the Democratic primary, including Republicans. And in fact, in Iowa and New Hampshire, we had seen moderate Republicans looking for an alternative go and vote for people like Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. Well, here, there was a call, a grassroots effort, not an official Republican Party thing at all, but a call to sort of disrupt and have Republicans go in and vote for Bernie Sanders was the word, to sort of bolster him going up against Donald Trump. And it's important to say that it was not about disrupting the 2020 election, they say. It was more about showing locally South Carolina officials who all work in that building behind me that they don't want open primaries and they want to change it here. But in the end, last night, there was absolutely no evidence that Bernie Sanders got any kind of lift from rogue Republican votes.
Did not look that way. Glenna, Tom Steyer dropped out of the race despite coming in third after spending lots of money. Did you meet any Steyer fans, and what did they say?
You know, we really did, and it's important to note the money thing is huge. $22 million just in this state, which is more than every other candidate put together spent here. But Tom Steyer wasn't really new to a lot of South Carolinians. He had done a lot of work here and a lot of money spent on environmental issues in the past. So he wasn't sort of a flash in the pan to a lot of people paying attention. But he really was banking on this state to give him a little push to go on after finishing in the low single digits in the past three states. That did not happen, and more significantly, Steyer didn't even reach the 15% threshold. I think he finished at about 11%, and you need 15% at least to even get one delegate. So after all that money and all that work and all that time, and some fans here and supporters for sure, he just didn't even meet a one delegate threshold and did not see a path to continue. And so shortly after results began coming in last night, he faced his supporters and withdrew. So now there are 6, and then in Super Tuesday, states on Tuesday, there are 7.
Yeah, not even with that dance that he did. Glenna, thank you. Super Tuesday right around the corner. We know you'll be watching. Up next, she weighs in on Bernie Sanders and coronavirus. U.S. Representative Donna Shalala joins us one-on-one.
Very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level.
President Trump tries to minimize fears over a coronavirus outbreak, all while health officials predict more cases are coming to the United States. The White House facing criticism from Democrats, including former Health and Human Services Secretary Donna Shalala, with whom we spoke on Friday. Good morning, Representative Donna Shalala. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. Let's talk coronavirus. No known cases right now in Florida, but you were the head of HHS for 8 years, so you know a couple of things about public health crises. Big picture first. Are we ready?
Not completely. There's no question about it. We don't have the testing facilities. We don't have a simple test for the coronavirus that's accurate, but we're getting there. And we got briefed this morning by the leaders of FDA, CDC, NIH, and the Public Health Service. Here's what we need to do, though, for Miami-Dade, for Broward, and for Palm Beach County, and for the state of Florida. We need to make sure we get resources to their health departments and to the state health department, because they're on the ground. That's the first place of defense for all of us, because the docs in our community, the nurses, they'll be reporting to their local health departments as to what they see or if they make a diagnosis. The resources are coming. Democrats and Republicans will agree on a package. It will be a down payment. It won't be the $2.5 billion that the administration asked for. It will be much more. We've already agreed on that. We also, while it's easy to criticize the administration, as far as I can remember, every administration stumbles a little at the beginning. The problem here is the president keeps stepping on the message. He talked too long, and he actually said the opposite of what the scientists, physicians said. So someone in the White House needs to tug at his coat and say, put the scientists and physicians in front of you, let them give the message to the American people so that so all of us can be reassured that people who know what they're doing are running this.
Right. We read that you actually had a warning to other politicians, don't open your mouth until you know what you are talking about. So talk about that, sort of having scientists take the lead, because it's a complicated process to get everything up and running so that people can be safe, but the message is also out there, and also to assure that there's enough funding and resources.
Exactly. It's resources and funding. It's a clear, consistent, well-organized message on a daily basis, probably. But we shouldn't pretend that this isn't going to spread. This may be another flu-like virus, though probably more deadly, that simply cycles through. We're working on a vaccine, but frankly, they won't have a vaccine ready for a couple of years. But it's an example of where we get together in emergencies, and we need this infrastructure in place forever. So we're going to have to talk about that here in Washington and in Tallahassee on how we can staff up, because these diseases, these viruses are going to keep coming at us, and handling it on an emergency basis is not a good idea, and it's not reassuring to the American people.
You were just talking about testing. Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez expressed some concern this week that those testing kits from the CDC have not arrived here in Miami-Dade County. That's slowing down the process. Have you spoken with anybody from the CDC? Is this something that Congress is looking into?
It's something that Congress is looking into and asking about. But again, we're reacting as opposed to getting out ahead of these viruses as they come down the pike. But there are things that people in our community can do. I've said to everybody, this is low tech. You wash your hands. You make sure surfaces are clean. But in addition to that, everybody in Miami-Dade that hasn't gotten a flu shot ought to get one now. And here's why. It's not because the flu shot is going to prevent coronavirus. It's because it will keep you out of the emergency room, out of our hospital beds, so that we can have them for situations like the coronavirus. And so if we want to make a contribution to our fellow Miamians, our friends and neighbors in South Florida, get a flu shot now, so that we're not jamming up. We're in flu season already, so that we're not jamming up the emergency rooms and hospitals and filling all the beds. That's what each one of us can do.
So should the coronavirus spread here in the United States, and we know, of course, there's that one case in Northern California that may be a community spread issue. They're still testing, of course, to see how that woman contracted the coronavirus. Is there a plan in place for federal workers in D.C. and here in South Florida more sick time or working from home? Because that is a concern, too. You don't want sick people to go to work.
Yes, exactly. And clear directions will be given out to people. This is going to spread. This is the disease in which people who don't have symptoms, obvious outside symptoms, can spread the disease. So it's much more complicated than simply people who already have the symptoms of the flu or a cold that may have coronavirus. So we have to be ready for it. And for people to stay at home if they feel ill, directions like that will be given out by the health officials in our communities.
While you were saying that administrations sometimes are can stumble easily in the beginning of crises like this, and you shouldn't be too quick to criticize, you did criticize Mike Pence along with some of your Democratic colleagues. He is addressing a conservative group here in Florida as part of a fundraiser. What is your message? You had some harsh words for him today.
Well, what I said, first of all, Vice President Pence and the president have been anti-science. And so they've got to depend on the experts and not overshoot the situation by expressing their own views. This is not a matter of expressing opinions. This is about keeping to the facts and making sure that these scientist physicians are the spokespeople. The vice president today announced that that's what he was going to do, that the messages were going to be pulled together. But, you know, they don't have a lot of credibility because the vice president and the president, because they've been so anti-science, so critical of these precise agencies. But we need to pull everybody together, and this is the time in which leave aside whether they funded the CDC in the budget that they submitted, because we weren't going to do that anyhow. Either Republicans or Democrats weren't going to defund the CDC. We're now going to put the resources in. We have to do everything we can to press them to pull us all together.
Congresswoman, let's talk about something that made headlines last week. You were one of the first people to weigh in on Bernie Sanders' remarks on 60 Minutes, saying that Fidel Castro did some good things in Cuba. Let's first listen to what he said.
You know what he did? He initiated a major literacy program. There was a lot of folks in Cuba at that point who were illiterate. And he formed the literacy brigade. You may read that. He went out and they helped people learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing.
And those were his comments on CNN after that 60 Minutes interview. What did you think when you heard that?
I was horrified, because while they were doing that for propaganda purposes, they were killing people and torturing people and arresting people and denying people free speech and human rights. This is a terrible thing that a presidential candidate doesn't seem to understand. I had to correct him on Maduro in Venezuela. I hope people are smart enough to understand that it's unacceptable to have a presidential candidate that believes that he can say that there are some good things and some bad things in what is clearly tyrant-led countries that have destroyed their economies, their populations, their healthcare systems. The Cuban government traffics doctors, literally human trafficking of doctors, as an income stream.
Then, Congresswoman,
so is someone going to say their healthcare system is great?
Can you explain
it's not great. I have nothing good to say about Castro or his successors or what's going on now in Cuba.
Then, Congresswoman, can you explain a vote that you missed yesterday that would have allowed action on a resolution by your colleague, Mario Diaz-Balart, that condemns Sanders' remarks? You missed that vote.
I actually co-sponsored the resolution. It wasn't a vote on the resolution.
Right, it was a procedural vote.
A vote to allow the Republicans to take over control of the floor, to offer amendments to stop us from a vaping bill. This bill, which we'll vote on today, is a bill to stop the flavors on vaping. A third of our kids now are vaping.
I think the question and the criticism is,
nicotine addictive,
do you not want to go on the record criticizing Bernie Sanders?
Pardon?
The question is, because you missed that vote, is that because you don't want to go on the record criticizing Bernie Sanders, who could eventually be the Democratic nominee?
Absolutely not. In fact, when I spoke on the floor, I quoted from that exact resolution, and I'm the co-sponsor of the resolution. And I said to my colleague, who's a very good friend, Mario Diaz-Balart, introduce this not as a way of stopping us from voting on a vaping bill. Introduce this independently. I'm the co-sponsor with you. We will pass it in the House of Representatives.
If Senator Bernie Sanders is the nominee, will you support him?
You know what? He's not going to be our nominee. He's just not going to be our nominee, so I'm not worried about it.
All right. We'll wrap this up, and we'll talk to you in a couple of months and see where we are then. Congresswoman Donna Shalala, thank you so much for your time. Up next, we're going to take this week's Hot Topics to the roundtable. Welcome back. I'm Janine Stanwood in for Michael Putney. We have checked in with Glenna Milberg on a campaign trail. There's a lot to get to this Sunday. Big news in the presidential race, a looming health emergency, a big soccer game tonight, and we're talking booze on the beach as well. It's a good thing that we have an expert roundtable. Bernadette Norris Weeks is an attorney in Fort Lauderdale with the law firm of Austin Pamies Norris Weeks, and she is the founder of Women of Color Empowerment Institute. Dr. Sean Foreman is professor of political science at Barry University, and David Smiley is a veteran reporter for the Miami Herald, now covering the political beat and campaign 2020. There is a lot to get to this morning.
Yes, indeed.
But let's talk South Carolina. Joe Biden, we sort of expected that he would probably win, but Sean, did we think he was going to win this big?
Well, for Biden, it was a great night. He won bigger than people were thinking going into this weekend. There were 1,000 cuts to the Biden campaign over the past several months. Poor debate performances, not raising money enough, other candidates coming in and taking his lane. So this was a huge win for Joe Biden, and it was, I think, convincing in the terms of the percentage. But it doesn't really reshape the race. We have to see what happens on Tuesday, and Biden is going into Tuesday behind Sanders in the key states.
You know, the question is always, do endorsements matter? And Bernadette, we were talking about this before. Jim Clyburn is a very popular member of Congress in South Carolina. Do you think his endorsement played a role?
It played a huge role. In fact, I don't think that Vice President Biden would have done as well as he did without that very critical endorsement. I do think, however, the Democratic Party needs to manage expectations with Biden, because we have California coming up, huge state. People have been voting for weeks now, and Bernie Sanders was ahead in the polls, and so we have to take all of that into consideration. Same thing with Texas. Sanders was ahead in the polls, and so I think that the Biden campaign just needs to, siphon off as much as they can, and the ad buys have already been made. So
Sure.
Bloomberg has been out there making those ad buys, and so there are a lot of things to consider there.
And we'll talk about Bloomberg in just a second, but going back to Bernie Sanders, we just heard from Donna Shalala. That was an interview that we did, David, on Friday, where she said, nope, don't think that Bernie Sanders is going to be the candidate. Now it looks like that that may be a thing that, Joe Biden may be one step closer to being the candidate. And you've spoken with a lot of the Florida delegation about the possibility of Bernie Sanders is the guy.
Right. That's the convenient talking point at the moment. Bernie Sanders is not going to be the nominee. I don't have to address whether I will or will not support him if he is. That case seems a little more like plausible deniability at this point. But Sanders, as you're talking about, Sanders is probably going to be the delegate leader coming out of Super Tuesday. He's also competing in North Carolina, in Massachusetts, in Utah, in Minnesota. There are 14 states on the ballot, and Biden has focused so much on South Carolina that he hasn't really been able to put in the effort or the money in those Super Tuesday states. And Bloomberg, meanwhile, has put in tons of money, but he's still polling middle of the pack. So it'll be interesting to see how things shape up. But Floridians like Donna Shalala should be prepared for Bernie Sanders to still be in the delegate lead coming out of Super Tuesday.
Bloomberg, talking about money, boy, he has spent a lot of money, and he was sort of thinking that he was maybe going to plug that hole in case Biden did not sort of surge. What does he do now? What does Bloomberg do now? And is it too late for him? Should he have campaigned in South Carolina?
Well, hindsight is 20/20 for all these candidates. They'd like to go back and have some do-overs. But, in many ways, I think we are just where we thought we were going to be today. A month ago, people thought that Joe Biden was going to win South Carolina, even though other candidates won the first three. It was just a matter of by what amount. And Bloomberg didn't compete in those four. His strategy always was to be prepared for Super Tuesday and hope to have a big win in some of these key states. But Bloomberg didn't do well in the in the debates, and his policies have been unpopular. So again, we're sort of right where we expected to be, and we're in a holding period, I think, until Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and then Bloomberg has to decide, do I keep going or do I turn and pivot and support Biden moving forward? Because it seems that mainstream Democrats want to stop Bernie Sanders to the detriment of the young people in the base and the party.
Well, Bernadette, you and I were talking about this earlier. You know a lot of young people who are Democrats who are like Bernie or nothing.
Yeah, there are a lot of young people that I work with through the Institute, and you don't want to dampen their enthusiasm about voting, period. And so as I listen to these young people talk about the election, and if Bernie is not the Democratic nominee, you hear them say things like, I don't, they would have taken it away from us, that kind of thing. And so it's really, the Democrats are going to have to figure out another way to manage this other than saying, he just won't be, because if that happens, it's just going to feed into that narrative that somehow something's been done to prevent him from being the nominee, if in fact he is.
Right, like it was taken from him.
Yes, that's right.
Once again.
Right.
So, Klobuchar, Buttigieg, they were sort of presenting themselves as the moderates, sort of in contrast to, the Bernies and the Warrens. Do they have a path forward?
Doesn't look like it. Pete Buttigieg doesn't seem to be resonating with minority voters at all. Amy Klobuchar, I thought should have sort of pulled a George Costanza like in Seinfeld after New Hampshire and just, bowed out right there on top, because it doesn't seem like she can win the nomination. But, it's really all about money and a path forward. And if those highly paid consultants are telling the candidates that they can still win, it's hard to convince yourself to get off of the big screen of national politics.
And go back to the Senate.
Right.
Where it's a little more, a little more grim. By the way, early voting starts in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties Monday.
That's right.
And then the next week is Broward County.
Yeah, so, we're talking about Super Tuesday this Tuesday.
Yep.
We vote in Florida 2 weeks from now. But as you just said, people will start voting now. So all this talk about polls and who wins, many people have made up their minds and cast their ballot. And so it's hard to catch up with what you do moving forward when people have already
But people seem to be holding on to their ballots right now in Florida and in other states where there is early voting. So usually we get to, at this point, about 2/3 of the vote is in by the time we get to Election Day. It'll be interesting to see if we hit that point or if people are really waiting to the last minute, which if you watch the coverage from other states that have already voted, a lot of people remain undecided until the last minute.
This race is so fluid right now.
It is. We have to talk about coronavirus for a second, because boy, that is another big story, and that's also a story that has influenced politics as well, or at least it's been politicized on both sides. An update from the Donna Shalala interview: 1 death now in the United States, and we now know that 15 people were being tested in Florida, 4 under investigation. Was Florida slow to give us information, David?
Yeah, they were, and whether it was due to pressure or the feeling that people needed to be more informed, the governor did decide on Friday to tell his Surgeon General that he needed to release the money. The state was previously hiding behind a state law that they said prevented them from releasing the information, the numbers of people being tested or monitored, and they changed their minds between Thursday and Friday. And I think it's good that we know the numbers, because it's better to know that there are 150 people being monitored in Florida than to, invent in your head whether it's 15 or 15,000. So I think it's good that we have the numbers. And the state they say, are going to release the numbers regularly on the Department of Health website. So hopefully they'll do that.
Right. And we're also learning now that the 3 departments of health, right, Sean, in Florida can now test. They don't have to wait for the CDC.
Right. The issue was that the test would have to be sent to Atlanta previously. So at least we have some local control over what's happening. But absolutely, information is key, especially when you have the president say at one point that this is a hoax. I think he actually walked that back a little bit. He said what's the hoax was that Democrats were saying that they were cutting money for the CDC.
Right.
But we need people to be on the same page. Somebody died in Washington State. That means that they probably had contracted this 2 to 3 weeks ago. So other people could be contaminated. More information is better.
It is a big story here in South Florida, and of course we're going to continue our discussion right here at the round table when we come right back. Welcome back. I'm Janine Stanwood in for Michael Putney. Glenna Milberg, of course, is on the road, and I have my powerhouse roundtable, and we're discussing a lot of things, including Bernadette, coronavirus. And you were saying that you'd like to hear from the experts a little more.
Absolutely. I think it's time to hear from the experts more. If you saw the very awkward news conference earlier in the week or last week, and the president's just chomping at the bits behind the experts speaking about the health threat. I mean, this issue has become so politicized, and it's unfortunate because it's clear that there is a public health threat out there that needs funding, deserves attention, and with a climate that we're in where there is rising nationalism, there are issues with trade wars, there are, all of these things going on. It makes it more difficult to work with other superpowers to really address this issue adequately, and we need to hear from those people who have the knowledge and have been working their whole lives to deal with issues like this. Mike Pence, with all due respect, he's someone who doesn't think smoking causes death, and so I don't think I want to hear from Mike Pence as the expert on coronavirus.
Well, that was one thing that Donna Shalala said to people sort of on both sides of the aisle, just, maybe wait and see what the experts say before you weigh in, because you may be a politician but you're not a doctor. Right. We were talking about how this affects sports, and the shocking thing is seeing those pictures of soccer matches being played in Italy in empty stadiums.
Empty stadiums, and they decided to keep the league going. That's how important it is to continue on with the business of the sport. But to play these games in big empty stadiums is just frightening to see, and that we may be seeing more of that moving forward as this impacts other countries.
And David, you tweeted something from a players group talking about March Madness.
The NCAA Players Association wants there to be a serious discussion about playing March Madness games without audiences, which would be shocking. It's a statement to how potentially disruptive coronavirus could be, though the federal government says right now everybody is low risk. But I think convention business, sports, travel in general, people are, I think, already freaking out.
Of course, they're concerned about the Olympics this summer in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And Japan has closed public schools right now because of the virus.
Right. There's a lot of concern and still a lot of unknown factors. So we'll wait and see. And this is actually a good tie-in to talk about sports, because do you know what's happening tonight? Miami Major League Soccer is finally being played. Can you believe it? 7 years ago, David Beckham came to Miami. Does it feel like 7 years, David?
Yes and no. Is the game being played in Miami?
LA.
It's LA, right? Is it ever going to be played in Miami?
That's the question.
I'm still pretty skeptical. If I had to put money on getting a deal worked out with the city of Miami government or not getting it worked out, I would bet on not getting it worked out.
Because there's still a lease agreement that has to be.
Yeah, they have to negotiate a lease agreement. They have not broken ground yet, and the Miami's government is kind of a disaster right now. So they have a new administrator. Maybe that'll help, but
Right.
I still wouldn't put my money on it.
I hear he's a pretty sharp guy. I think he'll be able to navigate through some of those issues, hopefully.
We were talking about Broward County, Bernadette. That's sort of where you are, and at least for right now, that's where the games will be played in Broward County. Do you think fans will flock in droves to?
I don't know about droves, but I think fans will come. I think it's exciting, the idea that it will take place there. I'm not a soccer fan personally, but I have a lot of friends who are, and you have a lot of, large Hispanic community out west. You have a large Caribbean community. This is what they know and they're used to, and I think it's going to be welcomed in Broward. So come on, David Beckham, come to Broward.
Yeah, but I think this is the question, is how long people will show up. Of course, they'll go to the first few games. It's new, it's exciting. There are a bunch of soccer fans down here, but people want winners, especially in Miami. We're a town that likes winners. So if they're not winning, they probably won't get much support, and there's a lot of other competition. So I think it's and we've had professional soccer in Miami and South Florida before, which has not succeeded. So this is a big test for Beckham and his investors.
Well, and it's been a big test in the last couple of years anyway, the partnership between teams and municipalities and stadium deals, and I think people were so turned off by the Miami Marlins and the ballpark deal that I think every side wants to be super careful.
Yeah, I think that's starting to fade a little bit. They don't have the same. They don't have to deal with the toxicity issue because they're not getting government subsidies,
right.
And I don't think people in Fort Lauderdale have the same visceral reaction to stadium deals that people in Miami still have. But even then, it's not like people grabbed the pitchforks when Miami-Dade County worked out its recent agreement with the Dolphins, which helped fund the renovations that Stephen Ross, the Dolphins owner, mostly paid for. So that seems to be waning a little bit, but good for Beckham's ownership group that they don't have to have that sort of hanging over their heads.
So they play in LA. Who do they play against?
The LA Galaxy,
Oh, there you
which
go.
actually was Beckham's team.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how he got to the United States. That was the hook to get the Miami team. I have to say, I was looking to see if it was going to be on television later, and it was not listed in my guide, not even the Miami team yet. So we need to get up to speed with the league if we're going to get fans in the local area.
Right. So we'll take it however we can get it. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. We have so much more to get to that we will right after the break. Welcome back, and apologies to any soccer fans playing along at home. I guess we've learned that it's the LAFC playing the Miami team tonight. So
Can't tell the teams without a roster.
right.
Now we know.
There you go. Now we know. Now you got to watch. Let's talk about South Beach. Miami commissioners this week voted 5-2 to roll back last call from 5 a.m. to 3 a.m. in some parts of the entertainment district, Ocean Drive, Washington Avenue, Collins Avenue, in an effort to curb some of the spring break brouhaha that happened last year. I feel like, David, I know that you and your colleagues at the Miami Herald have covered this. It feels almost sort of like a repeat of last year.
Right. Well, I mean, when I was covering Miami Beach government 10 years ago, we were dealing with these issues. And I think it's a product of the beach becoming more of a residential community and also a product of 13% voter turnout elections in which super voters really have a lot of sway with the politicians. So though a referendum to stop liquor sales at 2 a.m. Failed pretty overwhelmingly a couple years ago.
2017 or 2017?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
You know, they're back and they're pushing it again. And you know, I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, this has been an effort that's been a long time coming.
Right, and I think it was Memorial Day weekend that we would talk about before, but now the spring breakers are coming, and we were talking about this, Bernadette. You know, business owners say, whoa, hold on a second, these fights and brawls aren't happening in our establishments, they're happening outside, different times, it's going to hurt our workers. But we also heard from the police chief who said, our officers are tired. They're working 12 on, 12 off for this entire month of March. We need a break.
Well, the officers would have been working no matter what, and that's one of the things that the business owners were complaining about. The business owners, obviously, they want to protect their workers. And then the question is whether this is really too little too late, because the crime statistics don't show that the crimes were happening that they're concerned about between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. Additionally, you have other issues where the business community has planned their budgets around this activity, and the hotels are full. So Miami Beach has advertised itself as being a place where come, and this is what you can expect, because that's what you could expect in the past. And now people are coming, and they're going to either lose money, and those folks are just going to go somewhere else. I mean, it's not like they're not going to hang out. They're either going to be in the street or they're going to be in other businesses that are not banned by this ordinance.
But you know, unfortunately, a handful of those videos that sort of went viral last year, they were embarrassing for the city because it showed these fights and it was not good for the Miami Beach brand. Videos like these, and the police chief and some of the residents have said, well, we have to do something instead of nothing.
Yeah, why about more police? What about that as an option as opposed to
I think a lot of
putting
them,
something in place that may or may not be solve the issue?
It's a hard balance because it's a city that has to cater to tourists and residents and business owners, and Miami Beach, Sean, is such a unique small city. I mean, really, it's a kind of a city that gets so much attention, but really it's a small place, and those kind of 10, 15 blocks, that's where all the action happens.
Yeah, you said it. It's a tough balance, especially as they bring more residential areas. I lived on the beach for 10 years, and it's nice to be able to walk to those areas and have late night entertainment, but also there's the trade-off of the threats to public safety and the congestion. But some of those images we saw there were happening during daylight, so I'm not sure what changing the hour in the morning that alcohol is sold is going to make a difference. As was noted, a lot of the problems are separate from what's happening in the Strip from 3 to 5 a.m.
Well, the new revised sort of ordinance will start on March 13th, I believe, and it will go for 6 days. So we'll. And
that's the other thing. This is odd to do it right now, right before the season coming in 1 week. Why not the whole month?
Right.
So probably not the right way to roll this out.
It's not the right way at all. And some of the images that you saw, they don't just take place just that time of year or concerning particular people. They're things that take place so they have a comprehensive plan that they really need to look at in terms of studying and trying to solve. This was just really a knee-jerk reaction to something that's really not going to do very much to solve the issue. And those people are just going to go to, when I say those people, the people who are coming, if they keep putting in place things like this, folks are going to leave those business establishments and visit other places throughout the community and support those businesses in other places.
We want to move on right now and talk about another story that made headlines. A very popular mayor in Wilton Manors, Justin Flippin, he was on his way to a city commission meeting on Tuesday, but he never made it. The 41-year-old mayor died of a brain aneurysm. And you know, in my years covering South Florida politics, I can't remember, David, if there's been a time that we've seen, you know, a mayor die suddenly in the middle of office. And there's been such an outpouring in Wilton Manors.
Yeah, I can't think of a similar instance in terms of natural circumstances since I've been covering politics down here, so certainly unusual. And
we were talking about Bernadette, it's you know, kind of makes you want to hug your relatives a little tighter.
Oh yeah, especially with this being an issue or something that can happen suddenly. It's a silent killer. Who knows, you know, to expect something like this. But in terms of the man, you know, I read something about him not long ago where he had a lot of struggles in his life with undergoing conversion therapy and all of those things. And I can only imagine that he was a real beacon of light for people who wanted to live an authentic life. And so he's deserving of a great tribute.
And we also have memorial details right now for him. The memorial service is actually happening March 6th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the venue, Fort Lauderdale, 2345 Wilton Drive. A lot of people wanting to come out to pay their respects. We will have a check of weather and we'll be right back. A live look right now from our tower cams across South Florida. Looking pretty good. Here's Weather Authority meteorologist Brandon Orr with your Sunday forecast.
It does look pretty good. It feels pretty good out there, too, now that we're into the 70s. We start out chilly, though, into the lower 50s. Didn't take long for us to warm up. It's already 74 degrees in some inland spots, but 73 in Fort Lauderdale and Miami's not too far behind. So we're going to sit there for the next few hours, and then tonight drop into the 60s, and that's it. That's where we stay. It's going to be warmer tonight into tomorrow morning than what we've been used to. In fact, look at this warming trend. 84, 85 degrees towards the middle of this next week. Our next front is already on the 7-day forecast. It's moving in late Thursday night, and the front will actually pass through early Friday morning. So I'm hopeful that we'll get most of that 30% chance of rain out of the way early in the day on Friday, and then Friday night into next weekend, we can enjoy some dry weather, soak up the sun. It looks good.
Love it. Brandon, thank you. We knew the cool weather wouldn't last. You can catch any of our shows on local10.com, and you can also subscribe online to our This Week in South Florida podcast. Stay tuned for SoFlo Health right here next. Have a great day.
This is a Local 10 editorial with WPLG President Bert Medina.
It's time to cast your ballot and have your voice heard. If you're a registered voter, it's time to get out and vote. The presidential primary election is on March 17th. You can vote on election day, or you can cast your ballot early. Early voting in Miami-Dade starts March 2nd and runs through March 15th. Early voting in Broward County starts March 7th and runs through March 15th. And early voting in Monroe County begins on March 2nd and runs through March 14th. Remember, you can only vote in the presidential primary if you're registered with that particular party. But some of our cities have local elections that are open to all voters. Voting is a right and a responsibility. Get out and vote. Of course, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Let's continue it on local10.com.
This has been a Local 10 editorial. We encourage the presentation of contrasting points of view.